Well, one final question here. Typology, we've talked about the way it assumes a connection in the Old and New Testament. Maybe this also gives us a chance to consider God's grace in the Old Testament and the gospel message in the Old Testament. Could you maybe say a few words about that and perhaps relate it to a typological reading? You mentioned animal sacrifices. Maybe there's another one.
Right. Well, yeah, the important thing is that it's very clear in the New Testament that Christ is the only way that anybody can be saved anywhere in history. There is no other name under heaven given among men by which we may be saved. That's Acts 4:12. And John 14:6, where Jesus says, I'm the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. So we have to apply that to the Old Testament. We have to realize that if Adam and Eve were saved, they were saved by Christ. You say, how can that be? I mean, there's a mystery here because Christ had not yet come. He'd not yet come to earth. He'd not yet died. He'd not yet rose again. But God gave them pictures beforehand. The animal sacrifice is one. But he also gave them pictures, let's say, of mediators. Well, the animal sacrifice is a kind of mediatorial role that unites God and man. But think of somebody like Moses. Moses goes up to the top of Mount Sinai in Exodus 19. The people are told, in no uncertain terms, stay at the bottom because God is going to descend and God is holy. Right? And if even an animal touches the mountain, it must be stoned. There's this holiness of God, which is incompatible with sin. So the people can't draw near to God in their own person, but Moses does. Well, Moses is a type of Christ. So there's another example. The people have very concretely put before them, this is what it takes to be reconciled to God. This is what it takes to stand before holy God, namely through a mediator. Now, did they understand completely how Christ was going to fulfill that? I don't suppose they did. But I think then we can understand how they could have genuine faith. Now, some of them may not have had faith. They were just external members of the community. But the way was open when the Holy Spirit worked in their hearts. To have faith in the Messiah who was to come, to have faith in the mediator who was to come, to have faith in the new Moses, I can even put it that way, that was to come. So over and over again in the Old Testament, I think it actually helps us to understand people were saved back then in basically the same way that we're saved. Why didn't I know that? Because there's no other way.
Thank you for that word on the Old Testament and the Gospel, Dr. Poythress. This is the book, Biblical Typology. Thanks to Vern Poythress for joining me today. Thanks for watching. I hope this has been helpful. Remember to keep it clear and focus on Christ.